Greetings to the Gambia and Africa. Today marks the second edition of our motivational platform that comes your way every Saturday 8 p.m. at St. Biel's VIP Magazine. This program comes under the umbrella of the Pan-African Foundation called the African Philosophical Findings. Today, our lecture is a conversation about the current xenophobia attack in South Africa. Mr. Howard, you are aware of the recent happening in South Africa, where foreign nationals are being attacked, properties were vandalized and lives destroyed by the South African counterparts. What are your thoughts in this issue?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that wonderful question. Before I proceed, I want to use this medium to express my deepest condolences to the government and people of Zimbabwe for the loss of one of the greatest Pan-Africans to have lived. The late Robert Mugabe, he fought for the liberation of that country. Not only for that country, for the liberation of all of Africa. So for him to have in history today is a great loss, not only to the people of Zimbabwe, but all of Africa. May his soul and the souls of all faithful departed rest in perfect peace. A quick response to your question, Fatima Roshi. I feel so disheartened, it's so heartbreaking, so sad, so disappointing, so frustrating to see an African nation. But a nation with viable human resource base, educated people, some of the best universities on the continent, the most industrial developed nation on the continent, behaving in such animalic response to other foreign nationals in the country. The assumption, the mindset of the Western world is that these people they are just more or less like animals. They can conduct themselves orderly. That's going to be the mindset. I am tempted to believe the Donald Trump assumption about Africa, his wrong description of Africa. I am tempted to believe in that. William Butler says that give the African man a gun, he will kill his brother and sisters. Give him power, he's going to use that and loot out of the cash from the country. Give him democracy, what does he do? He used religion, he used tribalism, he used regionalism, he used sectionalism, he used all manners of social vices to infringe on the rights of the next person. He insults in the public, insults the leaders, all because there is democracy. We abuse all of the beautiful opportunities that are afforded us as citizens of our respective countries. What I think is best to be done is that Africa must, especially the South Africans, must retrace the steps, because they are sending a wrong message to the Western civilization that this continent cannot be able to conduct themselves, and that is the reason why we are a standing invitation to be prayed on at whatever time, whatever given time by other foreign civilization. We go outside and collect loan from China. We go outside and collect loan from the US. We look for multinational corporations, NGOs from other countries around the world to support our respected democracy. When we have governments, when we have institutions and individuals in Africa who can be able to assist in making sure that our own cash rotates on this continent, our own development becomes our responsibility, our own successes becomes our responsibility. But because of the divisions, because of the hatreds, because of the misunderstanding, because of the border divisions that we'll be able to engulf ourselves into, we cannot be a beautiful example. We cannot be a competitive continent to the rest of the world. And it is embarrassing, it is shaming, it is so frustrating and disappointing, especially coming from South Africa, and most importantly, coming to Nigeria, a country that fought so much, a country that contributed immensely, a country that puts everything on the table to make sure that South Africa became free as an independent nation today. It's quite embarrassing. It's a slap in the face of all of Africa.
It's really, really embarrassing. So with this, I think Africans, we are not using our brains wisely.
We are not. Just like St. Thomas Aquinas says that the height of a man is not from the head to the toe, like I normally say. It is from the neck to the hair. We are not using our mind. Nelson Mandela says that the more educated an individual is, the less arrogant and aggressive he or she becomes. But it is now ironical. People have gone to school in South Africa. So we would have thought that they would become respecters of Nelson Mandela's philosophy or his theory. But the educated man has taken cutlasses and moved in the streets and chopping Nigerians, chopping Gambians, and cutting these people into pieces, burning tires in the street, putting tires on people's neck, shooting and opening shop and vandalizing places, destroying properties belonging to foreigners. This is not reconciled in the quotation that says, the more educated an individual is, the less arrogant and aggressive he or she becomes. It is shaming, it is disgraceful to come from a country like South Africa that produced the greatest reconciler of the world in person of in the late Nelson Mandela. It is sad and disappointing once more.
As you all know, Miguel Howard was talking about the xenophobic attack in South Africa. And you all know it's very, very embarrassing, and it is really not nice for us Africans to be killing each other. And it is a mockery to all Africans. How will the outside world see us, everybody, looking at Africans killing each other, and we are all blacks. So Mr. Howard will be highlighting on some of these impacts, especially Nigerians' impact on South Africa during the apartheid regime. So Mr. Howard, can you please highlight on that?
Thank you. You know, every moment that I decide to speak on this topic, I feel so heavy in my heart. It's a sad time for all of Africa. Nigerians might be the victim today, or Ghanaians or Gambians. What about Tanzanians? What about Guineans? What about other nationals that are residing in that country? It's a very serious and huge slap, and I am with the conviction that Nelson Mandela in his grave today, he will be trembling terribly. He will be sad and disappointed that the beautiful legacy that he left behind in his homeland has been jeopardized due to the elementary mindset of some South Africans. But let's consider Nigeria, the country that has invested a lot in South Africa, especially during the struggle for the liberation of that country from the white supremacy. Nigeria puts in so much that I would have thought that South Africa and South Africans come to the realization that one of the fewer nations to have treated with decency, with manners, with warm hospitality should be Nigerians, because of the enviable contribution, because of the immeasurable contribution in that nation, especially during their liberation struggle. So tonight I have brought few of the key issues or impacts that Nigeria had on South Africa, especially during the struggle for the liberation of that country. In 1960, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was the first African leader to have written a letter to the ANC, that's the African National Congress, in South Africa. And the letter, the content of that letter was that the struggle for the end of apartheid has just begun. That was a conviction, that was a hope to the South African that we are going to fight against the white struggle in that nation, the white dominance in that nation. We're going to fight as a continent, even though we are Nigeria, we are not the direct victim of what is happening, but we are all Africans, we are equal, one body, one soul, one spirit. So when one nation is being threatened, when the peace and stability of one nation has been threatened by a certain group of people, it is our responsibility as a continent and people to find lasting solution to that. So Tafawa Balewa, as the Prime Minister of Nigeria, wrote that letter of conviction to the people of South Africa, to the black in South Africa, that the struggle to bring to an end this struggle, this white supremacy has just begun. We are going to fight to ensure that South Africa become an independent nation. And it came to pass today. And in 1961, he was the same leader. Nigeria was the same very country that first paid financial aid to South Africa. Just like I said in my previous message, this is a slap in the face of all of Africa, because the Africanization policy that was agitated by 32 heads of states and government in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963 was meant to unite Africans, irrespective of age, color, political status, or social status, or economic background. The intention was that after these people would have left the Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and the Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, Sir Dawda Karabajara of the Gambia, may his soul rest in peace, the Robert Mugabe, may his soul rest in perfect peace, the Ahmed Sekou Toure of Guinea-Conakry, may his soul rest in peace. All of these people sat down in Ethiopia and they spoke about the need for the unison of Africans. So regrettably, too many years after that, the expectation would have been that we unite, but sadly enough, we have started kidding ourselves. We started harming ourselves, like William Bolton says, that the African man lacks the brain and capacity to lead a society. Give the African man a gun, he kills his brothers and sisters. Give him powers, he loots the country, he steals everything. Give him democracy, then he uses tribalism and religious discrimination to mess up the system. So we have lacked the mental attitude to lead ourselves. So looking at one of the most viable countries in terms of economic, in terms of education, South Africa, to have started killing other Africans from the Gambia, from Liberia, most especially from Nigeria, it is a sad time for all of Africa. A very sad moment for us all. So I will be highlighting on Nigeria's impact on South Africa, especially during the liberation struggle. We said in 1960, the first leader, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa of Nigeria, was the first leader to have sent a letter to the militant of the ANC, that's the African National Congress, rejuvenizing the spirit, giving them that hope and conviction that the struggle to bring to an end this apartheid regime has just begun. Giving hope to South Africa that we're going to fight together. Even though we are Nigerians, we are not South Africans, but we are all Africans. So your problem is our problem. Your responsibility is our responsibility. Your peace is equal to our peace. Your struggle is our struggle. So we're going to fight to ensure that South Africa becomes a liberated nation. So we would have expected that South African go back and retrace the steps and read their history and come to the realization that it was not only Nigeria, but all of Africa. Because even Liberia was a safe haven for Nelson Mandela in 1962 at the zenith, or should I say the peak, or the tough moment of the struggle of liberation for that great nation. In 1970, Nigeria alone provided an annual charges of $5 million United States dollars annually for the South African leadership to be able to support that nation in her struggle to be a liberated country. Even in 1976, Nigeria set up the Southern Africa Relief Fund. And the Southern Africa Relief Fund was cash that was meant to help the victims of the liberation struggle. People who have been victimized, people who have been affected. Some, their parents have died and the children are more or less orphans. So the Nigerian government set aside that $5 million annually to ensure that South African victims of the apartheid regime was being revitalized. They were educated, they were fed and all that. $5 million is not small money for another country to be putting in your annual budget every year, every fiscal year, to ensure that your people are fed, you are revamped, your spirit is strong to keep the struggle alive. Nigeria did that. Even succeeding administrations in Nigeria, the Obasanjo regime, which was a military regime in the 1970s up to 1979, Obasanjo ensured that his government donated $3.5 million to South Africa to support the liberation struggle. And he personally, in his capacity as an individual, he spent $3,000 and he mandated every cabinet minister to put $1,500 monthly on the table to support South Africa liberation struggle. Not only that, every student in the Federal Republic of Nigeria escaped their lunch. They skipped that. They refused to take their lunch so that the money that was meant to providing lunch for students was used as donation to support the liberation struggle in South Africa. So it is a mockery to Nigeria. It is a shame. It is a slap in the face of Nigeria. It's a slap in the face of all of Africa, because the Ghanaian teachers stood up. They mounted pressure on the government to enforce the white supremacy to come to an end. So we would have thought that at this age and time, South Africa, as civilized as they are, assumptionally, I should say assumptionally, because civilized person Nelson Mandela says that the more educated an individual is, the less arrogant and aggressive he becomes. So when we see South Africans being aggressive to other Africans, killing them, looting their shops, destroying their businesses, I am tempted to ask the question, where is the philosopher Nelson Mandela? Where is the philosopher Nelson Mandela? A man who, after 27 years in prison, when he won the elections, the very judge who knocked the gamble to send him to prison for 27 years, he included him in his cabinet ministry as Minister of Justice. He said, let us come together, let us reconcile our nation. He didn't come from prison and say that, okay, this was a man who sent me in prison for 22 years, for 27 years. So you cannot form part of my government. He had all the rights to have imprisoned him. He didn't do that. He was not a dictator. He was a man who taught the entire globalized society what he called reconciliation. So South Africa, at this age and time, just 2013, you lost your greatest reconciler of the nation. So the message of reconciliation, the message of peace and stability would have still been rung in the ears of every single South African. But it's a shame and embarrassment that they have slapped out of Africa, and it's bad for our continent. What's happened? There was a time, in fact, the education system was being vandalized or being destroyed because students were agitating, the South African, the black were agitating that their educational system be run in their own African language instead of English language. And you have lost 700 students were killed in the street. What happened? Nigeria opened the doors to South Africans. They traveled to Nigeria. Some of them, their passports was been revoked by the apartheid regime. They revoked their passports. What did Nigeria do? In an effort to keep their hopes alive, what did Nigerian government do? Nigerian government made sure that they gave over 300 passports to South Africans to travel abroad and have educational opportunities, to be able to revamp their thinking pattern and become responsible citizens to come back to Africa and continue the struggle for the liberation of that country. And Nigeria created what? A trust fund to support that country. We would have thought that one of the fewer nations, even if South Africa decided not to treat all of Africa with due respect, but we would have thought that South Africa treats Nigeria with all the due respect because of our immeasurable contribution in the growth and development of that country, especially during the liberation struggle. That's so sad. Nigeria also joined other African nations to create the United Nations Special Committee against apartheid. And Nigeria had that committee for more than 30 years than any other nations of the world to make sure that the rest of South Africa was free and liberated. So it's a slap in the face of Nigeria. That shows that South Africa is being very ungrateful, not only to Nigeria, but all of Africa. Because the theory that have been propounded by other African leaders in Addis Ababa was that we unite, was that we hold together. Even Thabo Mbeki was in Nigeria for 7 good years. He was being warmly welcomed by the government and people of Nigeria for 7 consecutive years. His peace was restored, his security was there, was guaranteed. So why is it that at this time and age, Nigerians should be killed, their properties should be destroyed to the South Africans that benefited so immensely from the government and people of Nigeria, especially during their liberation struggle? It is high time that all African leaders retrace their steps and call South Africa to order. I will be asking the Nigerian government to revoke the diplomatic ties of South Africa right now. And all of Africa, the African Union, to revoke all diplomatic ties with South Africa as a quick warning to ensure that they retrace the steps and come to the realization that we need to hold together, irrespective of wherever we come from, whatever geographical division we have, whatever political division we have. We are one people from this continent, and we must not be regarded as foreigners in our own continent. A Gambian who goes to Liberia must be afforded the opportunity to contribute his own quota to the growth and development of Liberia. A Senegalese who goes to Ghana must be welcomed as though he or she is a Ghanaian. A Sierra Leonean who travels to Zambia must be welcomed and respected and treated decently as an African. A Zambian who travels to Kenya must be treated and respected honorably as though he or she is from Kenya or Zambia. Somebody from Mauritius who traveled to Comoros must be honored, must be respected and treated with decency. Not the kind of wrong signal that South Africa is sending to the Western world, as though Africans are people who lack civilization, as though Africans are people who lack hospitality, as though Africans are people who are not responsible, who are not mature, who are not tolerant, who are not peaceful. Nigeria was a viable country in ensuring that South Africa became liberated. Nigeria lost $41 billion during the apartheid struggle to one South Africa. Why? Because Nigeria refused to sell crude oil to South Africa at all, because they didn't want the apartheid regime to be strong economically to keep being alive. So Nigeria refused to do business with South Africa. And whatever oil, whatever crude oil that Nigeria would have sold to South Africa would have earned Nigeria nothing less than 41 billion. But Nigeria refused to earn that revenue, by refusing to make business with South Africa because of the white supremacy, all in an effort to ensure that South Africans were liberated and have their own independent nation. Nigeria was the only country globally to set up the National Committee Against Apartheid in 1960, with the sole purpose of spreading the evils of the apartheid regime. And that committee against the apartheid in South Africa was meant to enforce the national government of Nigeria, to design policies, to design billboards, to write on flyers, on placards, to discuss all the ills, the maltreatment of the apartheid regime in South Africa. What more can a brother do for another brother? What more can a nation do for another nation? Nigeria has fought in her fragile state with different religious discrimination, with ethnic extractions, with economic fraud and all that, with corruption all over the place. She has never abandoned any nation in the struggle. Nigeria has never abandoned even a country like Liberia that experienced 14 years of devastating civil war. Nigeria was one of the chief architects in making sure that Liberia was liberated, in making sure that Liberia was safe. In the Gambia currently, they are here making sure that peace and stability is restored in this country. Since 2016, they are here. They have been in Guinea-Bissau, they have been in all of Africa, but most importantly, the contribution of Nigeria to South Africa cannot be overemphasized. They fought hardly. They spend their money, they spend their economic power. But countries like the US that supported the apartheid regime, like the UK, like France, all these powers supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, regrettably in 2013. When Nelson Mandela left the face of this planet, when he died, during the burial ceremony, nations that fought harder for the success, nations that fought for the liberation of South Africa, their leaders were not given opportunity to speak on that burial. I would have thought that Nigerian president be given an opportunity to add his voice, but he wasn't given an opportunity. But the UK, America, the presidency were all giving preference. Kenneth David Kahuna had to protest. That opportunity be afforded him to add his voice during the burial ceremony. Even the Nigerian musician Sonny Okusu, who sang the song Fire in Soweto, to highlight the students that were killed in that country, in South Africa, during the struggle for making sure that the educational system be run in their own native language than English language. That music was so powerful, was a message to not only Africa, but the rest of the world, to highlight the importance of the liberation of South Africa. These people, Sonny Okusu was disappointed that African leaders were not given the opportunity to add their voice during the burial ceremony of Nelson Mandela. Even today, South Africa has continued to slap our faces as Africans from all walks of life, killing other nationals, killing Nigerians, killing Sierra Leoneans, killing Ghanaians, Liberians, and all over the place. Is this the message that Nelson Mandela preached when he was alive? Is this the message the 32 heads of state and government sat in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963 and spoke about the liberation of this continent? Was that a message they spoke about? It's a shame, it's a mockery to this continent. It shows that we have not been able to grow beyond our shadows of dormancy. It shows that South Africa has not been able to go back to the history and understand where they come from as a nation of people, to respecting nations that deserve the due process of respect as regarding the contribution in ensuring that their own nation was what? Safe and secure and liberated. It's a mockery. South Africa need to retrace the steps. Several contribution
A nation providing scholarship opportunities. Lot 86 South Africans were free in Nigeria to go to school. Multiple ones giving scholarship opportunities to study abroad, giving Nigerian passports because the passport in South Africa was being revoked. What more can a nation do for you? And Nigeria is a country that when her citizens enter your nation, I am not talking about the other weak assumption of terrible stories here. Of course, every nation has bad people. Gambian also have bad people. Liberians have bad people. Guinea-Conakry has bad people. Guinea-Bissau has bad people. Ghana has bad people. Mauritius, Senegal, Sierra Leone, all nations of the world have what? Bad people.
Okay, so I think we need to have our first break for now. Then we'll come back.
Thank you very much.